I think one of the biggest mistakes you can make when buying a house in Atlanta is buying the house that nobody else wants because you think you're getting a deal. If a house is $50,000 cheaper than everything else around it, there's usually a reason, and sometimes that reason is going to cost you when it's your turn to sell. There are problems with the house, and then there are problems with the property. I will buy an ugly kitchen all day long. I will buy dated bathrooms. I will buy the house with terrible carpet that hasn't been updated in 30 years because I can fix all of that. What I don't want to buy is a problem that I can't fix. So I'm going to show you 5 types of homes in Atlanta right now I personally would have a very hard time buying. And one of them is especially tricky because buyers will actually pay more for this type of house because of something they don't even own. But let's start with a problem, the most common one. I would not buy a house on a really busy road. And I know what happens when buyers find one of these. The house is usually cheaper. You walk inside and it's beautiful. Maybe a similar house a few streets over sold for $700,000 and this one is $650,000. So you start thinking, well, I'm going to save $50,000 on this neighborhood. I don't really care about the road. And maybe you don't, but you're not the person I'm worried about. I'm worried about the person who is going to buy it from you. Because the second you put that house back on the market, there are buyers who won't even consider it. Parents with young kids may immediately rule it out. Someone with dogs may not want to walk them along a busy road every morning and night. Some buyers don't want the constant traffic noise when they're sitting outside. And then there's something you probably won't notice if you tour the house on a Saturday afternoon. Trying to get out of that driveway at 8 a.m. on a Monday morning. If you're backing into traffic or you're sitting there in the driveway waiting for an opening just to leave your house every morning, something that seemed minor during the showing becomes a daily annoyance. Eventually, almost any house will sell if the price is low enough. And that's why a house on a busy road can look like such a great deal. But you need to understand that discount. You're probably going to give it back. If you get $50,000 off of the neighborhood because of the road when you buy it, don't be surprised when the next buyer expects the same thing. You can replace the kitchen, you can finish a basement, you can do landscaping in the backyard, and put $150,000 into the house, and the road is still there. Number 2 is almost the opposite, because instead of seeing something you don't like, you see something that you love. Privacy. You walk into the backyard and it's nothing but trees. No houses behind you, nobody looking into your yard. Maybe it looks like you have acres of woods surrounding you, and that privacy may be one of the reasons you're willing to pay more for the house. But before I did that, I'd ask one very simple question. Who owns the trees? Because if you don't own them, you don't own the privacy. This is something buyers around Atlanta and really all of Georgia need to be thinking about because we're seeing so much development, and yes, data centers are a big part of that conversation. Imagine buying a house specifically because there's beautiful wooded property behind it. 5 years later, that land gets sold. Maybe it's another subdivision. Maybe it's apartments or condos. Maybe it's a commercial development. Maybe it's a data center. The point is that every wooded parcel around Atlanta is likely going to be developed. The point is that you don't get to decide when or how it's developed. Buyers do something interesting when they're looking at houses. They mentally include what they can see as part of what they're buying. Those woods behind the house feel like part of the property. They're not. You're buying to your property line. So if privacy is one of the main reasons I'm paying a premium for a house, I want to know who owns the surrounding land, how it's zoned, whether it's protected, and whether there are already plans being discussed for it. You can't predict everything that's going to happen 10 years from now, but I don't want you to pay for privacy that someone else owns. Number 3 is where we get into something that can go from annoying to extremely expensive. Water. Atlanta gets a lot of rain. We have hills, we have clay soil, and plenty of houses with basements and crawl spaces. So seeing evidence that someone has dealt with water doesn't automatically scare me off. What scares me is when the property itself seems to be fighting water. Maybe the house sits at the bottom of a hill and everything drains towards it. Maybe you're seeing erosion. Maybe there's a history of water coming into the basement. Maybe there are multiple drainage systems around the house because owner after owner have been trying to solve the same problem. That's when I start asking a lot more questions, because water is one of those problems where you can spend a lot of money fixing what you think is the problem and discover you only fixed part of it. Maybe you need grading, then gutters, then downspouts, then a French drain, then waterproofing, then a sump pump. And if that water has contributed to foundation movement, now you don't just have a water problem, you potentially have a structural problem. This is also why I don't want buyers getting hypnotized by a beautiful renovation. You walk downstairs and there's a gorgeous finished basement. New flooring, fresh drywall, beautiful lighting, great. What did the basement look like before all of this went up? That's what I want to know. Was there ever a water problem? Were there foundation repairs? Where does the water go when Atlanta gets one of those huge storms? Because you're seeing the house for 30 minutes, you're buying what happens to it 365 days a year. And this is where I want to change the way you think about finding a deal. A house being cheaper doesn't necessarily mean it's undervalued. Sometimes it's cheaper because it's worth less. That sounds like the same thing, but they're not. If a $700,000 house needs a $30,000 kitchen and you can buy it for $625,000, maybe you found a great opportunity. You can fix the problem and potentially create value. But if that $625,000 house is cheaper because it's sitting on a property buyers don't want, you're not necessarily creating anything. You're buying the problem at a discount. So whenever you find that house that looks almost too good for the price, ask yourself, what can I change here that the previous buyers couldn't? If the answer is nothing, that deal deserves a much closer look. And just real quick, I'm going to throw in a shameless plug. If you are thinking about buying in Atlanta and you would like to work with me, someone who is in your corner and knows how to navigate these things, this is my cell phone number. Feel free to reach out. Okay, now, number 4 is a perfect example because the house itself might be fantastic. I would be very hesitant to buy a house directly next to major power lines. And I'm not making a health claim about power lines. That's not what this is about. This is about buyers. Some people don't want to live next to them. You can show them the nicest house in the neighborhood, and the second they walk into the backyard and they see those huge transmission lines, they're done. I actually know of a really cute mid-century house here in Atlanta that honestly I would have expected it to sell very quickly. It's been sitting for months. You can't see it in the listing photos, and it wasn't until I actually toured the house that I realized why it wasn't selling. There are major power lines running right next to it. And this is where buyers sometimes make the mistake of saying, well, that doesn't bother me. Okay, but it will bother the next buyer. Because resale isn't just about finding the one person that agrees with you. It's about having the largest possible pool of buyers who want your house. So if 100 buyers would normally consider a house like yours and then 30 immediately eliminate it because of the power lines, you just lost 30 potential buyers before we even started talking about price, conditions, schools, interest rates, or anything else. And when the market is really hot, you barely notice it. But you're not guaranteed to sell in a hot market. Imagine trying to sell that same house in this current market when inventory is up, buyers have 10 other houses to choose from, and they're negotiating everything. Now, the power lines matter a whole lot more. That's why I care about resale when I'm helping someone buy. I don't know what the market is going to look like when you need to move. Number 5 is one I would want to do a lot of homework before I ever got emotionally attached to the house. A home in a floodplain or sitting on a serious problematic lot. And I want to separate this from drainage issues we talked about earlier because drainage can sometimes be improved. This is about where the house physically sits. Atlanta has some incredibly hilly areas, and sometimes you'll find a beautiful house where the lot itself creates the problem. Maybe there's a massive slope. Maybe the house sits below everything around it. Maybe there's an enormous retaining wall holding back part of the property. Maybe the driveway is so steep that every time you pull in, you're going to wonder what's going to happen when it freezes. Or maybe the house has a meaningful flood risk. Those are things I want to understand before I buy because I'm not going to be able to change the topography. And don't underestimate retaining walls. People sometimes look at them like landscaping. Some of these walls are essentially infrastructure. If there's a massive retaining wall supporting part of your property, I want to know how old it is, who built it, whether it's showing any signs of movement, because I will tell you, retaining walls are extremely expensive to repair. Now, the flood piece of this deserves the same attention. Depending on the property, flood risk can affect insurance, financing, and eventually resale. Again, the question isn't simply, can I live with this? You probably can. The question is, how many future buyers won't? If you would like to connect with me, my information is in the description below. And if you like this video, there are some really good opportunities in Atlanta right now on homes that don't have any issues, and something just changed that could give buyers even more leverage. Go watch this next video because I will show you exactly what's happening. I hope to see you over there.